10. Okay. All right. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the ASRB on Monday, October the 21st at 4:30 p.m. Can we have a roll call?
Chair Lindsay,
Present.
Vice Chair Kamra,
Present.
Member Middleman,
Present.
Member Taft, and Member Delgavio is noted absent.
Do we have any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda. However, you do have two desk items for the project at 637 West Glen Way. There's just two different communications from neighbors, and Jillian will go over that during her presentation.
At this point, call for anyone in the public, either in the room or online, who wishes to make a comment or statement on anything not on tonight's agenda.
There are no hands online.
I see no one in the room. So we'll close that. Consent agenda.
Yes,
Nothing.
there are. We actually, I'm done this time. Well, Julie had them done. I had to.
It's 1 to 4.
Yes, there are
Okay.
4 sets of minutes.
All right. And we can take a motion to,
If there are no
Approve all of
changes, you
those.
can take one motion to approve the entire
Okay.
consent calendar.
I will move that we approve the meeting minutes unless there's any objection. Fellow members? No? No? All right. I move to approve the minutes of the 4 sessions from, what is that, July and August and September, as drafted.
I second.
Chair Lindsay,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kamra, Member Middleman,
Yes.
Member Taft, and Member Delgavio noted absent.
Moving on to public hearing, and the one item we have today, 637 West Glen Way.
All right. Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a great start to your week. This evening, I'm going to be reintroducing a continued presentation and consideration of a proposal requiring conceptual design review to construct a new single-family residence with an attached garage, partially de-lighted basement, new driveway, and associated site improvements on a vacant lot located at 637 West Glen Way. The application for conceptual design review was continued from September 9th, 2024, with direction provided to the applicant to provide project revisions and clarifications. During the review of a future application for formal design review, the town will determine if the project is exempt from or subject to the California Environmental Quality Act. As Sage mentioned, there are 2 desk items for 637 West Glen Way. The first desk item is a message from a neighboring property owner indicating that they approve of the design of the main residence. They are concerned about the initial recommendations of the ASRB to locate the site's required solar panels on the roof of the main residence with a preference for ground-mounted solar. The second desk item is a message from the neighboring property owner indicating that the proposed development will impair their view of the mountainscapes and that they have outstanding concerns regarding light pollution from the proposed residence. Community member has also indicated they have concerns regarding road clearance and emergency. Just as a little background, for those who weren't there, on September 9th, 2024, the ASRB provided the initial conceptual design review of the project. And after deliberation, the ASRB determined that several changes should be made at the conceptual level before providing all details necessary for the formal design review application. The ASRB provided a number of recommendations for the applicant to address during the conceptual design review, are as followed. The applicant shall continue community outreach to surrounding neighbors to discuss privacy concerns and the location of the proposed solar installation. The applicant shall provide the proposed locations for future solar installation with a noted preference for installation of solar panels on the roof. The applicant shall review potential light emissions through exterior glazing and from exterior lighting to minimize visibility from designated scenic corridors. The applicant shall replace the proposed black marble front entry columns with a material or color that is more consistent with the architectural style of the residence and the residential design guidelines. The applicant shall revise the exterior veneer siding to be a darker earth tone to further blend with the surrounding area. The The applicant shall provide samples of the proposed exterior colors and materials for board review, and the applicant shall update landscape plans to include proposed screening of the driveway and parking areas to minimize offsite visibility of vehicle headlights while entering and exiting the property, a detailed fence and vehicle gate plan that allows for wildlife passages on the site, and colors and materials for the proposed site retaining walls. At the request of the ASRB, the applicant has provided modifications to the proposed site plans and associated site design. The applicant resubmittal delineates the proposed locations of the site's solar field southeast of the proposed main residence, adjacent to the front property line. The provided plan set calls out the proposed solar design as ground-mounted solar rather than roof-mounted solar. The applicant has provided a solar system proposal prepared by David Morgan of Simply Solar, which notes that there is not enough viable roof space to accommodate the solar system size required for the home, and the solar company recommends ground-mounted solar, as shown in the provided mock-up. Accounting for the analysis of the roof's inability to accommodate the site's required solar field, the applicant has proposed installation of the solar field southwest of the main residence towards the front property line, and the applicant has proposed vegetation north of the proposed solar field, which will help reduce visibility from the uphill side of the solar field. While the town is not permitted to regulate the location of solar fields, the applicant has integrated both neighborhood outreach and preferences into the placement of the solar fields to help remediate neighbor concerns, as well as selected a location that is suitable for adequate solar capacity based on the site analysis completed by Simply Solar. The applicant has proposed a new vehicle gate to be installed in conjunction with the proposed driveway along West Glen Way. The applicant has provided 2 preliminary vehicle gate designs for review, both of which would be a maximum of 6 feet in height. It would include smooth stucco columns with colors to match the main house. One of the proposed driveway gate options would consist of a horizontal wood gate with black aluminum frame, and the alternative gate would include a vertical wooden gate with black aluminum frame. Prior to submitting for formal design review, the applicant shall select the proposed gate design. At the request of the ASRB, the applicant has provided a fence plan to accompany their formal design review submittal. The applicant has proposed a new 4-foot-tall and 6-foot-tall wood and wire mesh fence along the northeastern property line to create delineation between 637 West Glen Way and the neighboring property at 643 West Glen Way. The applicant has provided 4-foot-tall sections of the fencing adjacent to West Glen Way to comply with the minimum fence setbacks from the driving surface of public roads, as well as to enable wildlife passage over shorter fence segments. In addition to fencing along the rear property line, the applicant has proposed a 6-foot black aluminum fence connecting the proposed driveway gate and wrapping along the northern periphery of the home, creating a fenced yard space. The applicant has left space between the 6-foot-tall aluminum fence and the wire mesh and wood framed fence along the rear property line to enable wildlife passage through the property. Additional wire and mesh fencing is proposed along the southwest side of the main residence to fully enclose the fenced yard. A 3-foot-tall guardrail has been proposed on the southern eastern portion of the proposed driveway. At the request of the ASRB, the applicant has modified their conceptual landscape plans to include screening of the proposed driveway to minimize offsite visibility of vehicle headlights when entering and exiting the property. In addition to adding vegetative screening between the proposed driveway and West Glen Way, the applicant has included additional landscape planting on the northern side of proposed solar panel locations and along the northeast rear property lines to decrease the visibility of the main residence and associated site improvements, including solar, from neighborhood properties. The applicant has proposed Pacific wax myrtle to screen the solar panels in the northeast property line and white Nerium oleander to screen the driveway. Prior to resubmitting for formal design review, the applicant will need to update their submitted man-made slopes letter to provide the appropriate exhibits clearly showing the sections for the man-made grade and calling out man-made slopes on a site plan. If the slopes proposed for landscape screening are natural, the landscape planting with the landscape shall be planted with native species so that not require the installation of irrigation system. If the slopes proposed for landscape screening are man-made, the slopes can be planted and irrigated to the applicant's practices. During the ASRB hearing on September 9th, 2024, the ASRB made the recommendation for the applicant to revise the proposed colors and material palettes to choose an alternate darker earth tone in lieu of the original tile color, as well as to select a different color for the proposed black marble. Rather than selecting an alternative color and materials, the applicant has opted to present physical samples of the proposed colors and materials for the Architectural and Site Review Board to determine if the colors and materials are in alignment with the Woodside Residential Design Guidelines. David does have a set of colors and materials available for you all to review the physical samples if you want to pass those around while I finish talking. Do please feel free to review the physical samples that have provided to you by the applicant. In their response to the ASRB's comment, the applicant has noted that the proposed black marble is a natural stone in its raw form, that the stone is a muted matte finish and not polished. Furthermore, the applicant has asserted that the proposed porcelain tile is a natural material with a matte finish, and that the color does not set a precedent in Woodside, as there are many homes in the surrounding areas that are in the proposed color in either stone, tile, painting, or stained stucco. In their ASRB action letter, comment response letter, the applicant has provided a photo of the proposed material next to an unspecified home that they believe shows the proposed color is not too light and blends in with the surrounding landscape. The ASRB shall determine if the applicant adequately addressed the recommendations provided by the board during initial review or further changes are necessary to color. The applicant has provided conceptual interior and exterior lighting plans that provide an overview of the type, quantity, and placement of lights affiliated with the proposed main residence. The interior lighting plan is comprised of mini can lights and overhead fixtures, all of which will be downlighted. The exterior lighting plan contains can lights and wall lights. Furthermore, the lighting plan appears to contain step lights, although these lights are not specified in the provided legend. The applicant has indicated that all exterior lighting will be shrouded. Additional information will be required during formal design review, including manufacturer model numbers and manufacturer specifications. In order to minimize potential light emissions from the main residence, staff recommends consideration of low E-glazing when determining materials for the project. Members of the project team for 637 West Glenway are present at the meeting. Should there be any questions pertaining to the proposed design or the revisions that were made in response to the ASRB's initial considerations. If there are any additional outstanding questions for staff, please feel free to ask now, and I'm happy to help.
Thank you. Does anyone on the questions of staff?
One thing which was not clear, maybe because I was not in meetings,
Mhm.
The number of the solar panels
Mhm.
are distributed between the roof and the standalone mount. Was not clear. The total number was there in the design, but there will be like no solar panels on the roof at all. Everything will be on the ground. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So they have done their preliminary solar proposals, and at this time, there's nothing proposed for solar installation on the roof. However, as briefly mentioned in the last meeting, just to give you additional context, since you weren't here, the town can't really regulate the location of solar outside of health and safety considerations. However, the applicant has done some neighborhood outreach in an attempt to create a more amicable location for the neighborhood as a whole. Although, again, we can't really regulate that so long as there's no potential health or safety impacts.
And according to the desk item, looks at least some neighbors actually favor ground mount as opposed to putting everything on the top of two-story building.
Yeah, there's been a bit of a split versus the neighbors who submitted public comments as desk items for this round of review versus the previous round of review. What we saw last time was the preference for roof-mounted solar, namely to take the solar out of that pie-shaped piece on the back of the property near the rear of the house. But this time we did get some comment from neighbors who expressed concern with roof-mounted solar. But again, it's relatively out of our control as long as there's no concerns on health and safety.
Thank you, Julian.
Any other questions?
I just had a quick question, clarification. The neighboring residents, are they historically within the 30-foot setback, or are they setback 30 feet from the property line?
In terms of their property?
Yeah.
I can pull up the adjacent building study for us, which gives a bit of a clearer look. But I believe that they are compliant to my recollection. So this property is actually zoned a little bit differently from the remainder of the neighborhood. This is SR, where a lot of adjacent properties are R1. So there's some slight discrepancies in terms of setbacks with adjacent properties, but this kind of gives you a feel for how close these adjacent adjacent neighbors are relative to the proposed design.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
I don't know solar, but
Okay, great. All right. At this point, we'll move on to presentation from the applicant.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for, I'm meeting two of you for the first time tonight, so I'm glad to have you here to see our project. Jillian, there was a second letter I didn't get that had a concern from one of the neighbors about the visibility of the home. There, you read two of them. I only got a copy of one. There are two different ones in there, huh? All right, so one was the question about the solar panels. Oh. Yeah. All right, so I just wanted to, I didn't know where that property was relative to the subject property, so I was curious as to whether there's anything further I could do to address concerns for that neighbor is all.
That might have been me. We can talk after.
Oh, okay, well, then we should discuss if there's anything else further that the Lees could do to help mitigate any concerns you have, because I know you're on the uphill side, you have a wood fence.
Excuse me,
I'm
we just
sorry.
need to have everything recorded and you speak to the
All right,
board. If you guys want
sorry.
to talk after. you can
Yeah,
do that. That'd
so
be
anyways, I would like to, we've tried to do neighborhood outreach and clearly there's one discussion that I was having on the side and not in the hearing, sorry. So we'll continue to do neighborhood outreach as needed. Jillian really addressed most of the items that we addressed, Jillian has already spoken to, but I did want to address them myself briefly as far as the efforts we took to meet with the neighbors to discuss fencing, because that we hadn't presented fencing at the previous hearing, so we included it this time. So we provided fence designs and landscape screening. Moving of the solar panels required redesigning the septic field, the drainage plan. So we had to rearrange certain parts of the site infrastructure so that we could move the solar panels down into a less obtrusive location. And the issue for not putting solar panels on the roof, which is what we discussed at the last hearing, is the orientation of the building doesn't lend itself to good solar energy productivity because the orientation of the residents. So we are able, by putting them in the yard, get the best location and the best direction for the energy production. And we've presented landscape screening on the uphill side of those ground-based panels. So from the neighbors uphill, they won't see the panels, hopefully at all. Depends on the height that the hedges are trimmed to. So anyways, we did meet with the neighbors to try to address these concerns, to provide a corridor, nature corridor around the property by fencing in a smaller footprint just for the property owner's use. So what I have referred to as a coyote fence that encloses the property, and then we have the deer fence, which is further back. But we did provide then a corridor for wildlife to circumvent the property, so there's no way, again, to mitigate those concerns. The downhill side at the driveway, we've put in a much lower fence, and part of that is concern for deer as well. If deer were to get inside of the coyote fence, we wanted to make sure there was a way for them to exit on the downhill side. So we kept that a lower rail height along the driveway. And then we're putting landscaping around that as well to mitigate any light pollution from vehicles. So I believe all of those steps hopefully address the concerns of neighbors and of the commission. The more sensitive one right now I want to do is discuss the materials briefly. Some of the materials we've given you, for example, the TimberTech siding is much darker than on the material board printout. So there, I didn't make we chose the Timber Tech material for the siding, this was done for a couple of reasons. But you'll see that there's two different colors to the Timber Tech. And those are those blocks over here on your far right is the Timber Tech. And by using two different colors and mixing them together, it will give a more natural look to the wood siding instead of just being one constant solid brown. So that's why we're using and intermixing two different types of the Timber Tech to make it more natural siding look. The other thing is the ceramic tile, as you can see in the 3D rendering. The 3D rendering shows the shadow lines that you will get from any building. You do get shadow lines. And wherever there's a shadow, the reflectivity is reduced of the tile. And this particular product gives you three different reflectivity levels, a high one, a low one, and a medium range. So during the course of the day, depending on the sunlight, the exposure, overhangs on the building, you're going to get varied levels of reflectivity off of that tile. So we're trying to have it light enough to be a good contrast to the Timber Tech material. Because if we do the tile too dark and it all starts to just blend in with the wood siding, the building loses its texture and its articulation. So we're really hoping that in seeing the real products and seeing that in real life application, that we're not talking about a giant wall of reflective tile. It's at different angles, different shadows. So hopefully seeing those pictures in the tile real samples, that will be deemed acceptable as a product. The columns became a question mark. We couldn't find a piece of honed marble. This has a very slight buff to it, the black. And what we're going to do when the product is actually delivered, it's going to be honed to take any sheen off of the marble. So it'll be black, but it's not shine. When you say marble and things like a kitchen counter or a bathroom tile, that's not the effect you're going to have from this, because it is just a natural black stone when not buffed or polished. That also works well then with the black guardrails, the roofing material, so we're trying to tie those columns in with the black trim that's on the windows. So using a different material really seemed out of place architecturally. So that's why we wanted to be able to have the samples this time to show you. The color of the concrete, from a design standpoint, I would clearly love to see just the natural concrete because it creates, again, contrast and interest. But concrete can be colored in the mix and it can be painted. So if there is a concern about actually seeing concrete in its true form, we can mitigate that with mixing in color. And the question then is how much color, how dark, what tone. You could be done to look like sandstone. But again, it's going to all start to blend together once you put the landscaping in, I don't know that the concrete in its native form, natural form is going to be an issue because there's going to be so much landscaping around the planters. It can be painted as a last step concern. If the concrete is in place and it becomes a concern still to either neighbors or the board, it can be painted, but we're trying to let the materials stand on their own between the materials and the landscaping. And again, it can be, if the landscape doesn't mitigate it enough, then we can apply color. I like to start though with being true to the architecture first, that's all. So I don't know if you have any questions for me. I'm more than happy to try to answer them.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board have a question? Yeah.
The one question I had around solar, you mentioned the planters on the uphill side. protect that sight line. What did you find when you looked at the downhill side?
Well, the problem then, you're mitigating the sunlight. If you grow a hedge, because these panels are going to be probably about thigh high off the ground, because you need to be able to get under them to service them, and to clear any brush. So if you start planting something high enough to screen them, you're blocking the sunlight of the panels themselves. It's defeating the purpose. By putting the hedges on the uphill side, the view from the neighbors looking down will see a hedge. The visibility from the driveway looking up, we are going to be doing some planting along the driveway itself, but at some point, solar panels need to be exposed to the sun. So,
Oh, no argument. I guess, sorry, the more pointed question was, looking from the view of the downhill neighbors,
Mhm.
what will they see?
they're going to see solar panels on the hill. Yeah, that is the reality is, and I'm not sure anyone has effectively found a way to screen the panels themselves, because again, that's the way the product works. It's going to be exposed. We could look at trying to put landscaping closer to the periphery of the property, which might give you some screening visually if you're driving on the street. But that's only going to be effective when you're close to that. You know, once you get further away, you're still going to see them on the hill. And so, products they're coming up with, they're coming up with all different kinds of solar products that can go on buildings, on the roofs, and they're not as reflective. I'm not sure I haven't seen a product come out yet that, more of a dark material rather than the reflective that you see, but hopefully, that'll be something someone will be working on.
There is Tesla solar roof, but it's not necessarily the best.
It's not ready yet.
Okay, any other questions? None. Okay, I have a couple of questions.
Oh, sure.
Concrete, you mentioned, is that limited just to the retaining walls?
Yeah, it's just the lower planar walls, if you see in the 3D rendering, it's the lower planar walls at the base of the house. And one of the reasons I personally like to have a differentiation between the site walls and the materials of the house, because your landscaping and your site walls really aren't part of the house. They should be differentiated, and that's my take on that. I think I often have that issue where people want to have the walkways and the porches all become one material. And my approach to design is the house and your landscaping and hardscaping is independent, so.
Are you considering board formed for those walls or just traditional?
Well, that is a good question. Board forming would add some texture to it and create more interest than a smooth, clean concrete. So what you're looking at then is since the house isn't strictly modern, it's a contemporary style. If I was doing modern, I would want it to be smooth. But being that we're doing a more of a contemporary, we are trying to introduce rustic materials where we can, I think board form could be done effectively with the style of the house. And that I will recommend that, or if you recommend that, that may be what we'll be doing.
Official.
Question.
Actually, I have another.
No, I've got a couple more. Yeah, I mean, in terms of color, I mean, I just share my personal experience having done 6 prototype walls this year in concrete. Coloring did not work. We
Yeah.
ended up with natural concrete. So, the downlights, I think light pollution is still somewhat of a concern, hopefully mitigated with the recessed lights, shrouded, and selection of windows that limit the light passing through at night. Would you categorize the lights more as a spot or a wash?
They're wash.
Okay.
Yeah, it's general illumination within the building. We're not doing specific art lighting or spotlighting in the house. There may be, some of them might be altered to be more of art spotlights aimed on certain walls, but we're using it generally for illumination.
Okay.
And I believe the owner has been looking at exterior shrouded fixtures to go on the face of the building. And then we do have some shrouded walkway lights embedded in the steps.
Right.
So those are all the exterior lighting will be down facing and shrouded.
Yep.
Um,
Good.
Right.
In terms of the wrapped columns in the front, I think I was the one who was objecting most to the marble. And what I was objecting to specifically was the rendering, which showed marble with extensive veining through it that was more
Well-
representative of bathroom floor than a column. This material here you're proposing, I'm much more comfortable with, so.
Very good. I recognize that it gave too much of a, it was drawing attention to itself, which wasn't our intention to hear it all.
Agreed. Yeah, that's it. That was my question. Member Taft.
I presume it's just illustrate, just the illustration, because the lights shown on the illustration are not wall washers. So I presume it's just basically.
That's the problem with
3D
computer
rendering.
generated renderings.
Okay. That's what I.
Yeah, but yeah, thanks for asking. In fact, I'll make a point of that to find out if we can find, with the computer generated renderings, you just get what they give you sometimes.
As long as there is a spec.
We'll get light fixture specs, yeah.
Spot.
All right, good point, thank you.
I have a question. Can we get back to the two gates that you were proposing? I didn't quite understand the first one. You said it was sort of black.
Well-
What's that?
Well, the two different gates, these were proposed by the landscape architect, and I believe the owner is going for the vertical to match the wrought iron or the aluminum fencing that's going around the property. He's not interested in the horizontal. Both of those were just variations that the landscape architect had suggested. So once Jillian finds the, yeah.
I don't have the fencing diagram. It's been a while since we've actually. But the verticals look like, are the guidelines supposed to be so we could see through the gate versus a, pretty much
Or-
covered?
They're required to, the gates are required to be at least 40% open.
Yeah.
So they'll, with any gate chosen, they'll need to provide the calculations
Yeah,
for us.
I think what's deceptive is there's shading on that rendering. That shouldn't be gray shaded on the low, there you can see now, look, because so if we scroll down to the one, they like more of this design because,
Does that give you 40%?
yeah. We're noting that it must be
Yeah,
in our
they'll,
drawing.
we'll want to make sure they give us the calculations, but if you look at the pickets, they're much thinner than the voids, so generally.
Yeah, and
Yep.
the homeowner has already expressed more of an interest with this because it ties in better with the guardrail and the coyote fencing, as we're calling it. So they have a very small dog. They want to make sure the dog can have a yard without losing the dog. Okay, well, that is their choice already, so.
Any other questions?
So then, because it looks like steel,
Oh, that's someone else's house. That's not we're using that as an example. That was an example of the tile, a house that has this tile on it. Okay. All right, well,
No more questions? Thank you. Appreciate the effort to do the neighborhood outreach. Sounds like you've been rewarded by that, so that's good. Still some work to do. So with that, I'll close the board discussion or board questions and move it to public comment or public questions of the applicant. Yes. Yep.
So as far as the outreach, I'm actually one of the two direct neighbors, and I was not reached out to. This is the first I've seen the location of the solar field. And that is, my house is on that property side. So since the last meeting that we have, I haven't heard anything from you guys.
Apologize, kids.
And I know, but neighborhood outreach, I'm one of the 2 direct neighbors. So seems like that's
What's your address?
625,
625?
625. So it looks, I guess I'm northwest. So yeah, up in there.
Okay.
So now the solar field is on my side, and I'd like to sort of better understand what I might see from there, from my home. And again, I'm confused by this comment of neighborhood outreach. The second question I have is any proposed fencing on our shared property line where I have those oak trees right now. So it doesn't look like there's any proposed fencing there. So I just want to clarify that because.
If you could just please keep your comments directed to the board.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm curious about any proposed fencing on it basically is up my driveway where those oak trees are at our shared property line on the west side. Because right now that to me is just open, beautiful space and I can see straight through the hill. So I'm really hoping there's not going to be a proposed fence there. And
Just to clarify, there is no proposed fencing directly adjacent onto that property line. Looks like there is some existing fencing delineated
correct, yeah,
here.
that's my fence.
But in terms of locations for proposed fencing, you see my little mouse moving.
Yeah.
So there's some fencing along this periphery right here, creating
Yep.
a slightly smaller enclosed yard space. And then at the request of the 643 neighbors, they have installed fencing along their shared property lines, but the plans do not currently delineate any new fencing along that shared property line.
Okay, if that were to change, I'd like to ask you to please contact me just so we can talk through it. Okay, thanks. Maybe we can talk after about the solar.
Hi, I'm Kristen Crosland. I'm at 643 West Glen Way, which is the building in the upper right-hand corner. So a couple of comments. One, I was contacted by the Lee family and I did appreciate that. So as a person who did get neighborhood outreach, it does matter. So thank you for that. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is that the question asked about setbacks. So our house, we only bought it a few years ago, but it was one of the first houses built in the area. In fact, all of the property was owned by the family that built our house. It was the Frank family. All the neighboring property was called the Lands of Frank. They owned everything. So our house is much closer to our rear property line and their rear property line are much closer than would be normal. So we're like 15 feet from the property
Yeah.
line.
It wasn't
And
accusatory. I just.
no. I just wanted to clarify because it connects to the comments I'm going to be making. So in terms of fencing, we actually didn't request a fence. We would prefer not to have the close fence to us because of wildlife corridor, but understood from the Lee family that they wanted to have a clear property line fence. So obviously that's their prerogative and we would honor that. The thing that we had requested to them and we submitted a letter to everybody was that the fence and the planting associated with it would stay at 6 feet or lower. And that there would be areas for deer, lower even for deer to come through because it is a deer thoroughfare. But it is critical actually from my point of view that the planting, all that row in the red box of trees or shrubs or whatever those are kept low because that 15-foot height, the hill doesn't begin to drop off until after that. So if they had, they're 6 foot, 15 feet out, the biggest window line in my house will now be a 6 foot shrub. So if it goes even higher, the only thing you will see out that, because the hill drops after that, not there. So it's really important to me that that not be really high. The solar field piece, I was one of the people who had hoped it could be on the roof. I accept the review and where it has been placed. I really appreciate the intent to try to shield it. And in my comments to the town and to the Lees, I also queried, could there be additional framing? And I would suggest for our neighbor here, there could be some L-shaped framing towards her property line that would shield in the same way as mine, that would not impact sun exposure. And then the other thing I would say, I think it would be fabulous if on the base of the hill, there was some attempt to do some additional shielding, because as you're driving by, it's a very steep hill, and to have some kind of shielding there would help the whole neighborhood, and it would matter for the downhill neighbor as well. So in my mind, I accept the infrastructure of solar. It is unsightly, as important as it may be environmentally. And so anything that we can do to soften and mitigate, I think is worthwhile for the neighborhood. But that's it.
Thank you.
For those online, just a reminder, raise your hand if you'd like to speak. No raised hands.
Let's give a couple seconds to anyone online who wishes to speak, and otherwise we'll close public comment.
We do have a raised hand now.
Ah,
Ken Lee.
Yes, yeah, this is Ken Lee, the new owner of the land. So thank you again for having this second hearing. And first of all, yeah, Betsy, I'm sorry that I didn't do the outreach when I was talking to the other side of the neighbor. Christine. So anyway, so the we actually looked up the your side of the house from where solar panel is going to be. So it's not actually quite visible because we have nice oak trees on this side. But as mentioned by Christine, I think we can have those shrubs kind of making L shape, covering the your side of visibility too. So I think that should work well. So Walter, I think I'm right, right?
Can he hear me as well then? Yeah, so Ken, what we can do is we can turn that hedge and have
I-
it parallel to
yes.
the neighbor's property line.
Okay.
And that way it'll be a good visual barrier for that as well.
Okay, all right, yeah. And I was going to attend the meeting in person, but unfortunately I was on the road, so.
And so Ken, the other suggestion that we're hearing then is to continue
Mm.
some of the landscaping like we did below the driveway, possibly to carry that along the
Mhm.
roadway further up around the bend,
Yeah.
to create some screening along
Yeah.
from people driving on the road. So
Yeah, yeah.
just want to.
But actually, I did drove around that corner many times, and as Christine mentioned, the hill is so steep, so you actually don't see that area at all from the street. But anyway, so we can have more screens on the side. Yeah.
There is quite a bank off that side of the road. So any landscaping is gonna need to be up above that. So, and set further back because planting on that graded slope from when they built the road, I think as was mentioned, that landscaping on man-made grades are more difficult to get native vegetation to take. So if we're planting above that break, that also minimize the need of the height of the fencing because we'd already have a differentiation between the two heights.
Can I add one thing? So yeah, when you drive around that corner, the hill is steep and you can't really see beyond it. But once you put a 5-foot solar structure up there, you would be able to see that.
okay, any other comments?
Sort of a question. In your response, you mentioned that the stone, we believe clearly that it shows it's not too light and blends in with classic oak from California.
Mhm.
I look at that and it says white, it appears white. It doesn't appear to blend in with the golden California mills.
I-
It's more, I mean, even the nature of the material says on it that it's white. I see what you're saying, but I think that the guidelines for the town say that the material should blend into the hillside. So that when you're driving by, you don't actually see this White House. You see more of a golden or, earth tones. I don't particularly consider this earth tone, and I don't feel that it's golden either. I mean, for your response is, I mean, I don't see any gold in this.
If you could speak into the microphone so we have it on the record. Thank you.
I mean, I see white.
That's the reason we also brought a picture of it in installation, because the reflectivity of the material is apparent in the actual installation. So that's why we wanted you to see the product in real application as well.
So
Yes, that's a real house
I
with,
see that.
yeah.
Sun. You're not gonna get shadows, it's appear brighter with this stuff. I mean, that is I mean, that's a concern for me. I don't feel that it meets the guidelines or the colors that you're supposed to be blending into the hillside. So that when you drive them, you don't really notice. That's just a concern.
Okay.
Oh, you've seen it that long.
Any other public comment?
Ken Lee has re-raised his hand.
Okay. Mr. Lee?
Hello, this is Young Lee. My husband is in APEC, so that's why the connection was bad. So what I wanted to mention is that around the solar, we actually discussed the hedge even from the bottom. So if it's going to really clear create the issues, I told the landscaper to plant some a hedge there too. So we'll just make sure that those around the solar, we'll make sure that we'll plant all those the hedging so that no one can just have those the visibility from the long distance. They will see that, but we got clear note from the solar consultant that roof is not efficient enough. Okay, so I think he just gave us that comment. So this is the one. So we talked to other consultant and then made sure that this is going to work for all the drainage and everything. So we did that. So for those, hedging, definitely we'll make sure that we, walk around. And then we will reach out to Batch, as soon as my husband comes back, and then we will just, walk her through also. We just only thought that was the Kristen's, request, but sorry about that, the Batch. We'll just do that. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to acknowledge that comment. Thank you, Young. I do think you guys have been great about working with us, and thanks for being open to the idea of more of a hedging so that we can cover up those, prevent or sort of block the sight line into the solars as much as possible. So thank you.
Are we done with public comment? Any additional
We have some more re-raised hands.
re-raised hands? All right.
First, I'm going to call on Ken.
Oh, do I have the line? Okay, yeah, no, thank you, Batch. And then we will just definitely do that.
And did you wish to speak again? You have a raised hand.
No, I think I cannot remove because in my screen, I lower the hand, but I still have this. So I'm sorry. I didn't know that. I couldn't reply to that
Both.
because I thought that I lost the line. Sorry about that.
Both hands down.
Oh, even here? Oh, okay, sorry. Thank you.
Any additional raised hands? That we, okay, all right, let's assume that no more public comments online. With that, close public comment and shift to board discussion. Who would like to kick us off? Okay, we all look at member middle.
Just look it up. Community outreach is hard, you know, I commend you for working with the neighbors you could get a hold of and working with the neighbors that you can now get a hold of. And from what I've heard today, I'm confident that the concerns will be addressed as you go forward. With regards to site planning, it's a hard site. There's nowhere else to put the solar panels if you're not going to put them on the roof. I mean, you could mix them between the roof and the ground, but that's not an engineering problem I wish on anybody. And I do appreciate the solutions that you came up with while having to respect larger setbacks than the neighbors. With regards to building design, you know, I really appreciated the narrative around the materials. I personally don't have any issues, and I did find that alternating of wood siding be a novel approach. I think the landscaping looks great. The California natives are really nice to see. And I think the only recommendation I would have going forward is that you do try and shield the solar panels as much as possible while respecting the sun and, you know, sun access, you know, for the efficiency. I do think that there is some more places that can be applied. You know, with a well thought out solar study.
Any other board comments?
Yes.
Okay.
What I hear is this. The neighbors who drive on that street, and I saw it with my own eyes, clearly see a very steep hillside. And yes, it would be certainly nice to have as high vegetation, as tall vegetation as possible to block the kind of slightly industrial view of the panels. At the same time, on the side of the property, one neighbor says that it would be important to keep the vegetation to under 6 feet so that it would not grow to block the view, which is also a very reasonable concern. And on the other side, the other neighbor basically says quite the opposite, that actually it's better to screen. Maybe I misconstrued what you meant, but the long and short of it is that I'm not sure if there's a method to, over time, control and guarantee control of the height of the vegetation, unless there is a landscape plan which specifies the species and how high they grow. So to make it constructive, I think it's important to point that out.
Thanks. I just want to clarify because it is important. So I think my neighbor and I are speaking about something consistent around the solar field. We're both looking for more height there, more coverage there. The fence line that I was referencing is the one that's only 15 feet from my primary window line of the entire run of my house. And so that's the one that I'm hoping will not be shielded by high greenery there because it would obstruct all views.
Obstruct the view, yes, yes. Thank you. Again, what I'm really driving at is that the requirements for the vegetation around the perimeter and around the solar panels, there are different requirements. and there's no way to guarantee it unless there is a landscape plan which takes that into consideration when the species are defined.
Yeah, and we'll look at that closer with the landscape plan. There will be certain species that have a general kind of maximum height, and we'll ensure that they do not get too tall.
We have when planting, you want something that will take root and grow quickly enough to accomplish its goal, which is screening. And a lot of those plants that do that, they grow quite quickly. So there will be the challenge for the Lee family to have a gardener who can trim the top hedges as needed, because we know that's an expressed concern. I think that's a manageable thing to work, the neighbors can work out to ensure that, when it starts getting to just that height, then that's a neighborly visit. But I think things like that can be worked out between neighbors. So hopefully, I appreciate you taking that into consideration, because when we're planting species, we have that issue in other communities as well, as how big is big and how tall is tall. So thank you.
Exactly.
I think the only thing that we could change to address that is asking for a different species be selected for that screening. But there are trade-offs. And so I guess the question that I have for the neighbor is screening important, or is eventual height more important?
Big laurels work pretty well, screening without, at some point we look at all of it.
As opposed the shrub.
Okay, any other comments from the board? They have their arborist discussion. Any other comments? No? Okay. See if I can summarize. So, the good thing is most of the conversation focused on landscaping. So I would take that as a positive indication that as relates to the structure, you had appropriately addressed all the original feedback. Screening is hard, and personal experience is that's best addressed on site at the time of landscaping. Again, engaging the neighbors to ensure that everyone's satisfied. Can't put that in a plan, unfortunately. It's best done at that time. So with that, move to agree with all of the proposed changes that the applicant has provided. Move to staff for formal. No need to come back to the SRB. Hang on, we've got an additional item.
So you're making.
Are you mentioning as a comment outside of the motion? Oh, you're gonna make a tree recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay, so, that was my motion. Do we have a second?
Your motion is to move.
Yes. Second.
Chair Lindsay,
Yes.
Vice Chair Comra,
With one condition, I still don't believe the materials meet the town guidelines of blending into the hillside. But I would defer that to the formal design review and the planning commission to weigh in on that. But I'd like them to at least be noted that my concerns are that it's
No-
not what his comments
There's
were.
no variances.
So this project wouldn't go to planning commission, so it's just a matter of, and whether it goes to planning commission or staff, it's just a matter of if that was the board's recommendation. So we have a motion and a second. It doesn't include that, so it'd be up to the person making the motion and the seconder to see if they wanted to accept that amendment to the motion.
Material, this is not the right light to judge materials. Be outdoors in the sunlight. I have no concerns about material selection. I don't read it as bright white. You're holding it up against a piece of paper, which is bright white. So, I'm quite comfortable with the material.
Yeah, 'cause it-
Actually, one clarification while we have the applicant here. So of the two, the darker. So we should not be looking at this.
what's the
Okay,
lighter
that's- I
one
think
for?
that's better.
Pardon?
What's the lighter one for?
We brought that to help show that we're picking the darker of the two products that are available.
Got it.
And to show that there is a distinction between.
Are you good with it?
I would like to see a little better. But I do think when you have this color stone on the wall, and then you have the cement steps coming out with the cement, that I would probably put some color coating in the cement. So that it's just not all one big mass, the same color. 'Cause this is quite close to. But anyway, that's just my suggestion. But yeah, I'll go along with the motion of the rest of the committee. I think you've done a wonderful job on, especially being receptive to dealing with different plants. Although I think oleanders are pretty poisonous to deer, so I'm not sure.
I think we'll definitely talk to the applicant about oleanders. I've heard of the equestrian community have concerns about those. So if we can look at some that might be more animal friendly as well as providing the effective screening.
So the motion stands. at the
Yes, so
second.
we have a motion and a second to move this to formal design review with staff, given that story poles have been installed. And we've clarified that the darker tile of the two samples is what's being proposed, so we'll make sure that that's clarified. And
Yeah.
that's it. Then if there's a vote, we could go with that.
I'm going to start over. Chair Lindsay,
Yes.
Vice Chair Comra, Member Middleman,
Yes.
and Member Taft.
Yes.
Member Delgavio is noted absent. Thank you.
And so we'll get a letter out the next day or two, and we'll make sure you all get a copy of it as well.
Thank you very much to staff, commissioners. I hope you're doing more projects in Woodside. You didn't, this was actually a good experience, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, it's the only project, so we'll close public hearing. Miscellaneous items, director's report.
The only thing I'll report, just given, the scale and interest in the project, that tomorrow night, the town council will be reviewing the Kenyatta Corners commercial project to allow for the outdoor dining and the expanded parking lot area.
Do you have a summary of what the planning commission's?
Yes, I can. Yeah, I should actually report on that. So the planning commission reviewed it just a couple days after you all did on the 9th. Sorry, I have notes here. They forwarded it with a recommendation of approval to the town council. They did specify that, one of their concerns was really that they wanted to see what landscaping is being proposed, as opposed to just say, provide a landscape plan to be dealt with at the construction stage. There was to look at some fencing. They wanted the applicant to still further look at the lighting. And they looked at noise and relationships to the hours of delivery. They also clarified that they, for a kind of more of a security plan. So looking at possible barriers, although that's something the applicant has raised concerns with actually installing. But if there's any type of, third party like the Woodside Patrol or something, as well as looking at security cameras, additional signage. And so the applicant responded to those different items, some of which they addressed them all, and some reasons why they made minimal changes, but they did provide landscaping between the west side of the parking lot and the property to the west. They've lowered the light fixtures to 10 feet. They just really felt that the taller light fixtures were better to illuminate the lot as opposed to the lower ones to the ground. So that's something that the town council will discuss and consider. So yeah, there's a very detailed report online if you're interested in taking a look at it.
Was there any discussion around traffic study?
There was not a very detailed discussion around that.
One other question I have for you. When is the new ADU ordinance going to be?
Oh, that's a good question. That, very good. We are looking to, there's a couple of things, is we're not gonna take everything at once. There's a couple of things we definitely, for our housing element, in the housing element plan, to get going. So one of those is adding more ADUs on properties, as well as providing a little bit more flexibility, such as possibly developing in slopes in excess 35%, as well as, those are gonna be the two main things. Oh, and then we had by state law, we have to have a process in place in which architects or ADU companies, they could come in and get their plans pre-approved, and we would post them. It's not required by the law, but it's better if you're actually going to do a program to have a white place where you could post them on the website once they've kind of went through a preliminary plan check process, essentially. Whereas there will be caveats, it's various things will have to be met site by site. Obviously septic and utility, fire truck access, all of those things, they'll have to look at site by site. So that's going to be incorporated. So those are the main, and then the last thing is not significant, not really related to ADUs. One of the things we had to do is update our definition of emergency shelter per state law. So we're including that into our code. It's just taking the state law definition of emergency structure. Ours currently is very close. It's, but we'll take the exact language. So those are the things that we are bringing to Planning Commission on November 6th. Yes, so we want to at least get that part going. And then on the heels of that, we're also still kind of working on some other ADU stuff that we'd like to bring forward, noting that these items are kind of most important for what the town said we'd commit to by getting done by the end of the year. And then we're going to be looking at other conversions of other structures, barn conversions. Those will also be other topics that will come at a later date.
Maybe I can write on this question to detail it. Do we have a plan to encourage ADU placement away from that 4-foot setback to reward people for doing this? And also related to that, the typical ADU plans, they really are not designed specifically for hillsides or less steep hillsides. Maybe if someone is willing to bring it to ASRB, there's also the need to be reward in that. So the style will not be an eyesore for the neighbors.
Yeah, it's the setbacks is something in terms of, if the town's gonna allow more, are they gonna require increased setback? It's not something at the staff level that is being written into a draft. We just want to provide as much flexibility, but it's something the Planning Commission can discuss. And then in terms of designer view, I think one of the things down the road, as we've done with some other SB9, we've done it, and now with our multifamily zoning, we've done it, is looking at objective design standards for ADUs. And that's something we might actually even tap into the ASRB for to get some recommendations on that.
Yeah, I think that would be a great move because the state law, from what I remember, does not require any architectural review, but if someone is willing to do it.
Yeah,
It should be rewarded.
Sure, and if we can get some good, at least objective standards, where people will need to meet for their ADUs, those are things that we can consider and we'll be bringing down to the town.
She's an architect. I was just talking, she said that she's specifically doing.
Yeah, no,
She might be able to help.
we're very much in touch.
Oh.
Yeah, no, she's been involved in the process, and no, she has a lot of great ideas, and yeah.
With that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 5:40 p.m.